Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a sermon that tackles one of those big, universal questions, one that you find at the heart of so many faiths.
And that question is, how should we pray? Seems simple, right? But this is the exact question a group of disciples once asked Jesus directly. And get this, they weren't just looking for a few tips, they wanted a real framework, like a direct line to God.
This one request, which you can find in the book of Luke, is really the launch pad for the whole sermon we're looking at. And what it shows is something pretty profound. They didn't just want the power they saw, they wanted to connect to the source of that power.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with that foundational question, then look at the model for prayer that was given. After that, we'll dive into asking for what you need, petitioning for other people, and we'll wrap up with this idea that Jesus is enough.
All right, so let's get right into it. The first big question is, why prayer? I mean, these disciples had seen some absolutely incredible things, right? So why was this the one thing they zeroed in on? Teach us how to pray.
Well, according to the sermon, it's because they had a front row seat to some world-altering stuff. We're talking about healing the sick, forgiving sins, casting out demons, even calming storms and raising the dead. But, and this is the key, they saw something else too. They saw Jesus again and again stepping away from all that chaos to just pray.
And that's where the light bulb went off for them. They connected the dots. They saw the what, all those amazing miracles, and realized it was completely tied to the how, this consistent, focused prayer. They figured if they were really going to follow him, they had to learn that one thing that seemed to be the source of everything.
So Jesus hears this, and what does he do? He doesn't give them some long, complicated lecture on theology. Nope. He gives them a model, a pattern that we now know as the Lord's Prayer.
Now, the sermon makes a really important point here. This isn't meant to be some magic spell you just recite word for word. Think of it more like a template or a blueprint. It's got all the key parts. You start with praise, honoring God's name. Then you move on to your daily needs, the practical stuff. Then it's about forgiveness, both asking for it and giving it. And finally, it's about asking for protection from temptation. It covers all the bases.
Okay, so from that model, the sermon pulls out its first big reminder, and it's this. Just ask for what you need. And yeah, that sounds super obvious, right? But the speaker argues that for a lot of us, it's way more complicated than it looks.
So here's the problem. The sermon points out this sort of tug of war we get into. On one end of the rope, you have the shopping list prayer. It's just a list of wants, basically treating God like a genie in a bottle. But on the other end, prayer can get so formal and so holy that we're afraid to bring up our actual messy day-to-day problems. And the point is, both of those extremes totally miss the whole idea of a real relationship. And to drive this home, the sermon brings up this parable about a guy who's desperately knocking on his neighbor's door for bread in the middle of the night. Why? Because the message is that so often it's our own pride, or maybe shame, that keeps us from asking for help when we really need it, whether it's from a neighbor or from God.
And the direct answer to that pride and shame is this famous verse. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. The sermon frames this as a wide open invitation, basically saying, don't hold back. Because the whole idea is that a father wants to give good things to his kids.
And this is really where the sermon is trying to take us. The goal is to get prayer to a place where it stops feeling like a formal, stuffy request and starts feeling more like, one of those long phone calls with your best friend, where hours just disappear and you can talk about absolutely anything, no topic is off limits. That's the vision here.
All right, so that's the first reminder. The second one builds on this idea of conversation, but it shifts the focus. It's about how prayer isn't just for us and our needs, it's also a powerful way to stand in the gap for other people. This is what's called intercession.
And the sermon uses this incredible story from the Old Testament as a model, the story of Abraham. So God tells Abraham he's about to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham's reaction is, well, it's not what you might expect. He doesn't nod along and say, they deserve it. Instead, he starts pleading for them.
He kicks things off with a pretty bold number. Hey, what if there are 50 good people there? Would you spare it for them?
God says yes, but Abraham doesn't stop. He goes, okay, what about 40?
And he just keeps pushing, negotiating God down past 30. What about just 20 righteous people?
He keeps going with what the sermon calls shameless audacity, all the way down to his final number, just 10. If you can find just 10 good people, will you spare the whole city? It's this incredible model for just not giving up when you're praying for others.
Okay, this leads us to the final, and maybe the most crucial point in the whole sermon. It's the idea that ties everything else together. It's all about this principle of sufficiency.
The entire theological core of the sermon really boils down to just 3 words: Jesus is enough. It's a statement of total completeness. The idea is that no other power, no other help is even necessary.
And because of that core belief, the speaker gets really specific here, warning against going to other spiritual sources for help, things like spiritists, witches, warlocks, and so on. In this view, doing that is like trying to add a spiritual supplement to something that's already 100% complete. It just doesn't make sense.
So, the big takeaway is this. From this theological perspective, if you're looking for help from other sources, it kind of shows you don't fully believe that Jesus is enough. The work of salvation is presented as being totally finished. It's done. So there's no need for any backup plan or outside help.
So when you put it all together, the sermon completely reframes prayer. It's not about a stuffy ritual, it's about a real, living relationship. It's a journey that started with a simple question from a few disciples thousands of years ago, but it ends with a pretty challenging question for us today. If nothing at all was off limits, what would that kind of unlimited conversation actually look like for you?